Good morning. I want to dedicate my remarks today to the teaching faculty at Brooks, a group of wonderfully dedicated individuals. Mr. Hesse and I want to talk to you today about the importance of a good education and what that education provides for you. Ultimately, an education provides you the opportunity to live the good life. To me, the good life is more of a journey than a destination, and an education equips you for that journey. Many from the past have described this journey as the search for the beautiful. As I struggled to define the good life, and I have quite a bit over this weekend, I settled on the search for the beautiful as its best description. Basically, I would define this as the ongoing search by all of us to find some meaning in life. A good education equips you to take part in that search. All the academic disciplines have a role to play here. The only real difference among students is perhaps you have a favorite subject. Consider for a moment, what is your favorite class and why? In some capacity, this is a class that speaks to you in some special way. Nonetheless, at their very best, I believe all your classes culminate in providing you the capacity to enjoy life, another central part of the good life. I'll speak to you in more depth on this from the perspective of humanities courses later, but first want to mention, of course, what a vital role the sciences play here. Mr. Hesse will speak on this topic in a moment, but I wanted to share a recent experience that struck me about this topic. I recently stumbled upon a book in the Brooks Library by the title Universe on a T-shirt, The Quest for the Theory of Everything. A whopper of a name, right? To me, this seems to be a good scientist's version of looking for the universal or the transcendent. In any case, perhaps Mr. Hesse will shed further light on this subject. I invited him to join me in this talk for two reasons. First, because, as so many of you know, he's an excellent teacher and an all-around good guy. Next, because of a number of years ago, as part of faculty evaluation, I got to see him teach a number of times. I remember he was explaining one of Newton's laws of motion that says, for every force, there's an equal and opposite reaction force. It was kind of like a eureka moment for me, because it occurred to me that we constantly see this very same phenomenon in history and in human affairs. Think about it. Does it not explain why revolutions occur? For every force, there's an equal and opposite reaction force. In any case, Mr. Hesse's turn to speak, and here he is.
Good morning. I'd like to take a moment before I begin here just to try to express how honored I am to have been invited here to share this moment with a respected and honored colleague and a very good friend. It's truly moving for me. I'd also like to tell you how humbling it is to stand before this group of talented students, respected colleagues, and I can only hope that the thoughts that I have to share with you this morning will be worthy of the attention and respect that I know you will pay me today. Autumn has always been my favorite season. Fall brings the energy and optimism of a new school year. Autumn ushers in football, and in recent years, meaningful baseball for long-suffering Red Sox fans. With autumn come crisp red apples, the awesome majesty of the Thanksgiving turkey, and of course, my birthday. Autumn weather invites us to pull on a fleece jacket before the evening dog walk, but still allows us to cling stubbornly to summer by rocking athletic shorts and sandals. Fall brings one of the most gratifying benefits of man's mastery of his environment, the ability to sit in a home that's warm, comfortable, and bright, all the while knowing that the world outside grows colder and darker. Nothing captures this feeling more than the sight that greeted me this morning, the sight of frost on the window pane. Stretching out like ghostly gray feathers, the delicate fingers of frost are like ink blots or amorphous shapes of clouds, allowing everyone to see or imagine whatever they wish in them. Some might see the stately, towering trees of a shadowy forest. Others might make out the spires and battlements of a magical city. Me, I'm a scientist. I see hydrogen bonds. And that brings me to the topic I've been invited to address today. Coach K suggested that we speak together on the contributions of education to the pursuit of the good life. And I've chosen to focus on the benefits of science education. This is certainly a hot topic in today's media. I'm sure you've all heard of the impending shortage of doctors, computer scientists, and engineers in our country. In that news, some hear the call of economic opportunity. A science degree could unlock for you a lucrative and satisfying career in a field that's very much in demand. Others hear a call to arms. In my grandparents' day, American factories retooled to crank out the tanks and aircraft that kept fascism from our shores. Many feel that today our schools and universities should be gearing up to turn out the engineers and technologically savvy workers that can defend our economy from perceived threats from India or China or elsewhere. Certainly, your generation will be faced with many challenges, social, economic, and environmental, which can and will be overcome with solutions posed by science and technology. While some of you may don white lab coats and join the front ranks of the battles to cure cancer and ALS, to free us from dependence on fossil fuels, and to ensure a sustainable future for a growing population on our shrinking and warming planet. However, all of you, even those who become poets, politicians, brokers, and CEOs, will face decisions, whether as consumers, voters, corporate leaders, or parents, that can and should be informed by an understanding of the science behind those choices. The practical benefits to science education are many and obvious when it comes to securing economic success, both individual and societal, and in producing a population that's equipped to make sound ethical decisions in an increasingly technological world. But that's not what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the frost on my window and those hydrogen bonds. Frost is ice, and ice is water in its solid form. I'm sure you all know the chemical formula of water, H2O, signifying a molecule made up of two smaller hydrogen atoms, each joined to a larger oxygen atom in the molecule's center. Some of you may know that these three atoms align in the shape of a V, much like a Mickey Mouse hat, with the oxygen where Mickey's head would be, and the hydrogens forming the ears. As water cools towards its freezing point, the individual molecules slow their random chaotic movements and begin to come together. This is where those hydrogen bonds come in. The hydrogen bonds are really just an expression of electrostatic force, the attraction between positive and negative charges. This force pulls the hydrogen end of one molecule toward the oxygen end of another, causing them to line up in three-dimensional zigzag hexagons, like the zigzag stripe on Charlie Brown's t-shirt. These hexagons are far too small to see with the naked eye, but when repeated millions of billions of times over in even the tiniest crystal of ice, they produce the perfect, elegant hexagonal symmetry that we see in snowflakes or in the feathers of frost on a window pane. I can't tell you how much the delicate beauty of those patterns is enhanced by seeing them as arising from the infinitesimally tiny interactions of fundamental forces acting on an unimaginable multitude of identical molecules. So yes, I understand that my education in the sciences has given me practical benefits. After all, it provides me with my livelihood. It led me here to Brooks and granted me the opportunity to do what I love, surrounded by colleagues I respect and admire, and in a community that has become so dear to me. But my science education has given me something even more valuable. Science gives me a lens through which to view the world. And when I turn that lens on even the simplest things in my daily life, I am invariably rewarded with vistas of incredible depth, elegance, and heart-wrenching beauty. I know that sounds strange. If anything, we're led to believe that scientific analysis robs natural phenomena of their beauty. After all, lab-coated scientists and technicians can reduce rainbows and sunsets to instances of optical refraction. They chalk romantic love up to pheromones. And in some cases, I'm told they even dissect kittens. Scientists are cold, dispassionate, and heartless. I couldn't disagree more with this perception of science. Think about our relationships with best friends and lovers. The more we know and understand them, the more profoundly we come to love them. I believe that knowledge and understanding of the things we care about only deepens and intensifies our experience of their beauty. We would never think that a musician's knowledge of rhythm and meter, of melodic and harmonic structure, might diminish her experience of the climactic swells of a symphony's final movement. Instead, the visceral and the cerebral appreciation of the music combine to deepen and enhance the educated listener's joy in the moment. A painter looks at a canvas hanging in a museum and sees in the brush strokes, lines of perspective, and the very composition of the pigments a myriad array of artistic and technical choices that define a masterpiece. I can only imagine that his experience of that painting is deeper, more intense, more moving, and more satisfying than my own. In the summer of 2011, I stood for the first time at the edge of Arizona's Grand Canyon. Well, not quite at the edge, because of a lifelong paralyzing fear of heights that was only aggravated when my young daughter nearly stepped off the trail and over a precipice at Arches National Park a few days before. Before me, I saw a living landscape, a turbulent battleground that spoke to millions of years of conflict between the forces of wind and water that carve away earth and stone, and the unimaginable tectonic forces that periodically thrust mountain ranges and even whole continents toward the heavens. In the exposed layers of rock, I saw the visible record of countless ages of patient sedimentation, punctuated by brief intervals of violent upheaval that transformed the very rock itself with staggering pressure and infernal heat. In the palette of muted colors before me, I saw the rust red of iron linked with oxygen, contrasting with the subtle blackish greens of iron sulfides. Some see the world of science locked in conflict with the realms of religion and spirituality. To those who hold that view, I offer up that moment on the edge of a canyon. In that moment, a gift from my own science teachers, I experienced awe and wonder and gratitude at the sheer magnitude and grandeur of creation, along with the profound humility that stems from perceiving one's own insignificance in the infinite expanse of the cosmos. If that perception is not spiritual in nature, I don't know what is. While science may strive to answer some of our questions about the how, when, and where of creation, any knowledge we gain through science invariably reveals a deeper layer of questions, including the why, the by whom, and the for whom, that science makes no claim to understand. Those of us who lose sight of the common ground between the scientific and the spiritual because of squabbles over trivial details, such as whether our world came to be in 7 days or 1.5 trillion, are simply missing the point. With the gift of science, I walk the world like some mythical shaman, able to see the invisible spirits that animate the rocks, the trees, and the water. Like Neo from The Matrix, I've been given another layer to my vision. Along with the people and objects around me, I see that tumbling stream of digits and characters that make up the source code that governs their movements and actions. To me, a baseball speeding towards home plate sprouts vectors at right angles as air resistance, Magnus force, and gravity wrestle to determine the ball's course. As fireworks explode in the summer sky, every color shouts to me the name and symbol of the element whose spectral signature determines its hue: the crimson and scarlet of strontium and lithium, the blue-green of copper, potassium's subtle violet. And of course, I see those Mickey Mouse molecules of water, drawn together by forces as deeply inevitable and fundamental as gravity, joining hands with the grace and precision of dancers in a ballet, falling into place like the panes of colored glass in the rosette window of the cathedral at Chartres, as Jack Frost paints my window pane on some chilly night in the autumn I love. Thank you.
Wow. Thanks, Mr. Hesse. I'm not sure how I can follow that. The other thing I forgot to mention in the introduction, I was asking, because I remember at one point Mr. Heston mentioned to me that he was double major, and I actually texted him recently and said, you a double major? And he said, yeah, it was English and chemistry, and could you tell? So I'll be brief. I want to be a little more specific about how humanities courses help you live the good life. There is much agreement that self-knowledge is at the root of education and one of its most fundamental goals. One of the outcomes of self-knowledge is self-mastery. And that's one of the paths, I think, to the good life. Simply, this is what many of us call self-control. Are you able to conduct and maintain self-control? When you live entirely or attempt to live entirely by a moral or ethical code, one that you have freely chosen, just consider for a moment the many positive results. You're in such a better position to avoid the latest fad or to not be seduced by the latest promise of instant gratification or even intoxicated by material wealth. Consider the many issues of phobias and addictions that plague our world and your ability to avoid these pitfalls as a result of an education that has self-mastery as its goal. Another thing that a good education equips us with is a nice balance between a practical connection with the world coupled with just enough detachment from it. It's a tough balance, but this is a path to the good life as well. This is to be engaged with the material world without being consumed by it with things like, as we all deal with, right? Anxiety, worry, stress. The balance is struck with a practical approach to life coupled with an ongoing recognition with what is ultimate and what is universal. I think this allows us to keep solid perspective on the challenges of life. Next, a good education encourages the cultivation of many important virtues, another central component of the good life. Confucius said, education can transform human nature in the direction of virtue. At its best, a good education develops in all of us a deep well of empathy for others. It leads us down the path of service rather than indulgence and exploitation. It teaches humility rather than a selfish and self-centered worldview. It also constantly requires a commitment to the truth as objectively as we can manage. Lastly, and perhaps its ultimate virtue, is philanthropy, a love and deep appreciation for the human condition. I think a good education supports and ought to support the cultivation of these values. I want to finish with a brief description of particularly what an effective education in history can do for the cultivation of the good life. Wisdom is defined as judgment, right, or behavior based upon past experience. And history offers nothing if not lessons of the past. It also informs as to both the very heights and depths of human behavior. Genocide is difficult to imagine without examples of its occurrence in history. That informs us and makes us vigilant. It's hard for us to imagine the heights to which a single human life can rise without its many examples in history. Consider for a moment Shakespeare's plays. This can serve to inspire us all. I'd like to close with a basic recommendation that I frequently give to my advisees and my own children. So I hope I've established the many positive outcomes of a good education. And the last question is, what is your role in all of this? Let me leave you with two thoughts. First, please understand that the best investment you all can make at this time in your life is an investment in yourself through a good education. It will pay dividends for the rest of your life. And lastly, you must be an active participant in your own education. If not, you might just miss the chance to live the good life that so many of us desire. Thanks for listening.